Big-budget action films are built on control of fire, of falls, of fear. Every explosion is pre-planned, every punch choreographed, every danger carefully managed. At least, that's what we're led to believe. But behind the polished chaos on screen, there are stories of sets unraveling, egos clashing, and real danger creeping in from the edges. In some cases, the only thing more explosive than the action was the atmosphere on set. Directors were replaced mid-shoot, actors stormed off, stunt performers didn't come back, and studios, desperate to keep the illusion alive, scrambled to edit, cover, and contain what couldn't be controlled. Some of these movies became classics, others became cautionary tales, but all of them shared one thing. What happened off camera was often more dramatic, more unpredictable, and far more dangerous than anything in the final cut. In this countdown, we're not just revisiting iconic action movies, we're peeling back the veneer, we're stepping past the fireballs and into the firestorms that raged behind the scenes. These are the films that pushed too far, fractured from within, and nearly never made it out alive. Let's count down 15 action movies where the biggest explosions happened after the director yelled cut. Fact has shown: Mad Max, Fury Road, 2015. On screen, Fury Road is pure momentum. Vehicles roar, sandstorms rage, and survival feels elemental. But the real battle wasn't between Max and Immortan Joe. It was between the actors themselves. Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron were at odds from the beginning. Hardy was known to be intense, unpredictable. Theron demanded discipline and clarity. That clash of temperaments quickly turned personal. Theron reportedly requested a producer be present during shared scenes just to keep things civil. Hardy later acknowledged he was difficult. At the time, though, there was no apology, just rising tension under the desert Sunday. The production dragged through unforgiving heat and endless retakes. Crew members described the atmosphere as toxic. And yet, paradoxically, the hostility bled into the characters, giving Max and Furiosa's dynamic an edge that felt impossibly real. When the film swept the Oscars, many celebrated the vision. Few realized it had been forged in mutual resentment and emotional exhaustion. And if this sandstorm felt suffocating, the next production took place thousands of feet above ground, with danger hiding in thin air. Fact 2. Cliffhanger. Etusinde og 993. Few films captured the sheer vertigo of danger like Cliffhanger. What audiences didn't see was how close that danger came to derailing the film entirely. Shot in the icy Dolomites, the production faced treacherous conditions from the first day. One signature stunt, a daring aerial transfer between planes, nearly ended in disaster due to sudden wind shifts. Then came the financial collapse. Carolco Pictures, the studio behind the film, was bleeding money. Halfway through production, budgets were slashed. Elaborate sequences were shelved. The crew feared cancellation. Sylvester Stallone, unwilling to let it all fall apart, put up his own money to keep the cameras rolling. He restructured scenes, rewrote dialogue, and streamlined the action sometimes overnight. The final product feels seamless, but behind every snow-covered shot was a production struggling to hold its footing. Next, a moment so dangerous, so real, it cost a stuntman his life, though the footage remained in the final cut. Fact hash 3, 36, 2002. Vin Diesel brought attitude. The stunts brought danger. But for one crew member, XXX was the last job he'd ever take. To capture a breathtaking motorbike leap off a bridge, stuntman Harry O'Connor was brought in. The first attempt was flawless. The bike soared, the landing was clean, the shot made it into the movie. The second attempt never should have happened. O'Connor miscalculated the timing by mere seconds. His body struck a bridge pillar at full speed. The crew watched in horror. He died instantly. The tragedy wasn't publicized. The studio moved forward, using the successful take and avoiding discussion. But those on set never forgot. Director Rob Cohen later said O'Connor died doing what he loved. But the silence that followed said more. Suddenly, no one was eager to push the envelope, because this time, it hadn't bent, it had broken. And while that tragedy was sudden, the next actor spent months risking everything himself with no doubles, no safety net, and no second chances. Fact hash 4. Mission Impossible 2, 2000. Tom Cruise didn't just act in Mission Impossible 2, he challenged death, and not just once. The opening cliff-climbing sequence wasn't fake. Cruise insisted on performing the stunt himself, clinging to a vertical red rock face in Utah, hundreds of feet in the air, with only a barely there safety harness hidden from view. During one take, he slipped. The harness caught. Barely. The crew was frozen. John Woo, the director, refused a second attempt. "We're done," he said. Then came the knife scene. A real blade, hovering inches from Cruise's eye, rigged on a cable to stop just short. A single mechanical failure would have ended everything. Paramount was reportedly furious about the risks, but Cruise had control and no intention of backing down. Every second of tension in the film, you can feel it in your bones. That's because it wasn't entirely performance. Some of it was survival. But for the next film, danger wasn't just a stunt. It was the set itself flooded, pressurized, and one wrong breath away from drowning. Fact #5. The Abyss, 1,989. No dry land, no shortcuts. Just actors submerged for hours and a director obsessed with control. James Cameron's The Abyss was shot in an abandoned nuclear reactor, converted into one of the largest underwater film sets in history. Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio spent day after day underwater, often with limited oxygen and no clear way to communicate. Harris nearly drowned during one take. Mastrantonio, forced to reshoot a CPR scene again and again, finally broke down and walked off set screaming. Crew members later described the atmosphere as psychologically punishing. They weren't exaggerating. The set became infamous. Cameron pushed everyone physically, mentally, emotionally. The result? Groundbreaking visuals, an Academy Award, and a crew that never wanted to speak about the experience again. Some films demand a lot. The Abyss nearly demanded everything, and if being underwater wasn't bad enough, the next shoot was surrounded by something even more dangerous. Cartel threats, real gunfire, and fear that never left the frame. Fact #6. Man on Fire, 2004. The violence in Man on Fire wasn't just scripted. At times, it felt like it was closing in from all sides. Tony Scott chose to shoot in the heart of Mexico City, where kidnappings and cartel violence were a very real backdrop. Almost immediately, the production drew attention, and not all of it was welcome. Threats were made, armed guards were brought in, a fixer working with the crew was assaulted, prompting a shutdown of filming. Gunshots were heard near set, locations were changed last minute. Scott fought to keep the tone gritty, raw, authentic. But tensions escalated behind the camera too, especially between Scott and producers, who wanted a safer, more sanitized version. Denzel Washington later said the fear in his eyes during key scenes wasn't acting, it was real. Man on Fire captured something honest and brutal, maybe too honest. For some on set, it stopped being a movie and started feeling like a warning. And now, from fire to water, the next film brought chaos to the surface in ways no one saw coming until it was too late. Fact #7. Waterworld, 1,995. Waterworld didn't just flirt with disaster, it stared it down for months at sea. The idea was ambitious. Shoot on open water, build an entire floating civilization, make it real. But nature had other plans. A storm leveled the massive main set early in production, sinking millions of dollars and weeks of progress in a single day. The logistics were a nightmare. Cast and crew were ferried back and forth by boat. Seasickness, exhaustion, and sunburn were constant. Equipment failed, tempers flared. At the center of the storm, figuratively and literally, was Kevin Costner. As both star and producer, he had the final say. Reports from the set described him as increasingly controlling. He clashed with the director. He ordered reshoots. He demanded changes to the script mid-shoot. The budget ballooned to a record-breaking $175 million. Studio execs panicked. The press labeled it a sinking ship before it even premiered. And yet, the movie was finished. It made its money back. But no one walked away untouched. Waterworld was never really about the ocean. It was about drowning from within. Next, a film where tragedy didn't strike in editing or finances, but in the moment, a gun was fired and something went terribly wrong. Fact #8. The Crow, 1,994. Brandon Lee was supposed to emerge from The Crow as a star. Instead, it became his tombstone. During the filming of a pivotal scene, Lee was shot with what was meant to be a harmless prop gun. What no one realized was that a fragment from a previous dummy round had been lodged in the barrel. When the blank was fired, it launched that fragment directly into his abdomen. He collapsed. Hours later, he was gone. Production halted. Shock and grief swept through the set. But after legal reviews and financial pressure, the studio chose to finish the film using stand-ins and early CGI. Most of the audience never knew they weren't watching Lee, but those on set never forgot. They spoke of earlier accidents, electrical fires, minor injuries, and an atmosphere of unease. Some whispered that the film was cursed. The final product is powerful, poetic, and chilling, perhaps because every frame carries the weight of something real. The loss of a life for a story that was never supposed to cost one. And if that story was marked by tragedy, the next was driven by ego, a lead actor so uncooperative, the production nearly fell apart from the inside. Fact #9, Blade, Trinity, 2004. By the time Blade, Trinity started rolling, its lead actor had already checked out, Wesley Snipes, once the driving force of the franchise, barely engaged with the production. He allegedly stayed in his trailer for hours, refused to speak directly with director David Goyer, and communicated instead through sticky notes signed "From Blade." Scenes were filmed without him. Stunt doubles and stand-ins filled in entire sequences. Co-star Ryan Reynolds described an atmosphere so tense it was hard to focus on the work. At one point, rumors circulated that Snipes and Goyer had a physical altercation. Though denied, the hostility was undeniable. Cast and crew were walking on eggshells. The energy on set collapsed. The final film was messy, visually stylish, but emotionally vacant. The tension bled through the screen. What was once a franchise built on charisma had become a lesson in dysfunction. And just like that, Blade was done. Next, we head to a jungle, not just in story, but in reality. A war film so plagued by madness, it nearly consumed its own creator. Fact #0, Apocalypse Now, 1979. Some films are called chaotic as a compliment. Apocalypse Now wore that label like a scar. From the outset, Francis Ford Coppola's vision of war grew out of control. Tropical storms devastated the set in the Philippines. Props were lost, schedules destroyed, the budget spiraled. Martin Sheen, already in a fragile state, suffered a heart attack during filming. Marlon Brando showed up overweight, unread, and unwilling to cooperate. Coppola rewrote massive sections of the film on set. Some days, he admitted, he didn't know what he was making anymore. He mortgaged his house. He lost weight. He lost sleep. We had access to too much money, and little by little, we went insane, he later confessed. When the movie premiered, it was hailed as genius. But behind every shot was a real breakdown, emotional, financial, and human. Apocalypse Now didn't just depict the madness of war, it became a war of its own. And the next story isn't any calmer. One actor vanished mid-shoot, and the crew had to improvise an entire film around the hole he left behind. Fact #0, The Man from UNCLE, 2015. Guy Ritchie had style, Henry Cavill had charm, but one half of The Man from UNCLE's leading duo suddenly disappeared. Armie Hammer, co-lead in the slick spy reboot, walked away from set during filming reportedly, due to creative differences and a dispute over the script. The absence wasn't planned, it wasn't announced, it just happened. What followed was controlled panic. Entire sequences were canceled. Cavill was forced to perform dialogue scenes alone. Ritchie scrambled to rewrite the script and salvage what he could with doubles, editing tricks, and whatever coverage already existed. Hammer eventually returned, but not without leaving a mark. The chemistry felt uneven. Moments felt stitched together. Audiences may not have noticed, but the people behind the camera knew they had narrowly avoided a much bigger collapse. And the next film didn't escape so easily. A clash between director and actor went far beyond arguments until fists reportedly flew. Fact #2, Three Kings, 1999. Tension was built into Three Kings, but it wasn't just on screen. Director David O. Russell was known for pushing actors hard. George Clooney, known for professionalism, pushed back. Their styles didn't clash, they exploded. On set, Russell's aggressive behavior toward crew members reached a boiling point. Clooney intervened. The confrontation escalated. According to some reports, it turned physical. The two were separated, but nothing really cooled down. Clooney later called it the worst experience of his professional life. Despite the chaos, the film turned out sharp, stylish, and full of bite. But the damage was done. The two never worked together again. Three Kings was about a messy war in the desert. So was The Shoot, only no one yelled cut between takes. Coming up, a film that completely lost its ending, then had to rewrite its survival story from scratch. Fact #3, World War Z, 2013. For a film about global disaster, World War Z came dangerously close to becoming one itself. The first two acts were in the can. The action was filmed across continents. Brad Pitt delivered. But there was one problem. The third act didn't work. Early screenings were a mess. The ending confused audiences. No payoff, no closure, so they hit pause and hit rewrite. Massive battle sequences set in Russia were scrapped. Writers Damon Lindelof, Drew Goddard were called in to reshape the final act from scratch. For over a month, nothing was shot. Hundreds of crew sat idle, morale sank, the budget exploded. Brad Pitt, also a producer, stayed the course. The new ending, smaller, more personal, more suspenseful, saved the film. It became a financial success, but behind that success was a full-on crisis. World War Z wasn't saved by chance. It was saved by rewriting the plane mid-flight. The next film couldn't be rewritten. Its cast lost a key player and had to resurrect him from memory and digital effects. Fact Hasson 4, Gladiator, 2000. Oliver Reed's performance in Gladiator is fierce, layered, unforgettable. What makes it haunting is that it wasn't finished. Reed died of a heart attack midway through production. His role as Proxima was far from complete, but cutting the character wasn't an option, so the filmmakers turned to technology, using body doubles, lighting tricks, and pioneering CGI. They reconstructed Reed's presence in the final scenes. The cost? Over $3 million and a weight of responsibility no one expected. The process worked. Audiences barely noticed. But for those who shared scenes with him, finishing the film meant acting with a ghost. Reed's final performance wasn't just powerful, it was part miracle, part seance. And for the final story, a production so poisoned by ego, sabotage, and studio panic, it collapsed into cinematic legend for all the wrong reasons. Fact Hasson 5, The Island of Dr. Moreau, 1996. Some films break rules. This one broke everything. Director Richard Stanley had spent years developing The Island of Dr. Moreau. But just days into filming, the studio removed him, citing missed deadlines, erratic behavior, and growing cast tension. But Stanley didn't leave the jungle. He stayed in disguise, reportedly sneaking onto set as an extra, watching as someone else shot the movie he built. His replacement, John Frankenheimer, inherited a mess. Marlon Brando refused to learn his lines. Val Kilmer clashed with everyone. Entire shooting days were wasted. Extras roamed unsupervised in heavy prosthetics. Key scenes were shot without any coherent plan. The final cut? Confusing. Fragmented, ridiculed. Dr. Moreau didn't fail quietly, it imploded. And in doing so, it became something rare. A horror story not about the plot, but about the shoot itself. Bonus fact, Roar, 1981. Some films are dangerous because of stunts. Roar was dangerous simply because it existed. Over 150 wild animals, untrained lions, tigers, leopards, and more were brought onto a single set with actors, children, and a script that dared them not to behave naturally. There were no animatronics, no cages, just chaos and a camera rolling. The injuries were almost constant. Melanie Griffith, barely a teenager, was mauled in the face. Tippi Hedren was thrown by an elephant. Director Noel Marshall was bitten repeatedly. Cinematographer Jan de Bont had his scalp torn open and needed over 200 stitches. Dozens of crew quit. Insurance refused to cover the project. The shoot dragged on for 11 years, and through it all, the cameras kept rolling, capturing moments that no sane production would ever attempt. When Roar was finally released, it barely made a dent at the box office. But what it left behind was something deeper. Proof that obsession, however well-intentioned, can become recklessness. There is no other film like Roar, and that's probably a good thing. Now you know what happens when the explosions aren't just effects, when the danger, the blood, and the screaming don't end when someone yells cut. So we want to hear from you. Which of these films shocked you the most? Do you admire the dedication or question the line between art and recklessness? Tell us. When does filmmaking stop being brave and start becoming madness?